What's up, guys? In today's video, I'm going to be talking to you about the game that I want to make in my future. Not something I'm working on now. I'm not going to talk to you about what the game looks like, really. I mean, I'll get to that later for those of you who stick around for that part. But what I want to start off with is to explain why it is that I want to create this. Because essentially, I've looked at my life and my past, and I feel that I've identified one specific thing that was missing in a lot of the situations in my life that were the hardest. For example, I traveled a lot growing up, and my mother, my father, and myself moved into the United States from overseas. Shortly after doing this, my father died of lung cancer. And because of this, I and my mother had not a support group. We didn't have a group of people there who knew us and loved us in person. This existed scattered throughout the world or in different places, but not around us. We did not live in that. And after going through multiple events of similar kinds of this nature, I've come to determine and feel very strongly that that lacking environment, not having a group of people, a family who is good to you and you are living with, that is really important here, that you are interacting with. Because in this case, we had access to those people. They existed, but for whatever reason, we weren't around them, right? I believe that almost all hardship in life comes from loneliness. It comes from lacking this group, this familial bond that you have. Because if you have this, you can develop a faith in everything being okay. Because people are supporting you. People encourage you when things go wrong, right? And so many people in the world are lonely. It's ironic. It's ironic that people are lonely, yet there's billions of us, right? And I think that it's possible to create a game, an MMO in particular, that is designed to combat this. And the goal of the game isn't to keep you playing the game. The goal of the game, secretly, not obviously, is to connect you with individuals who actually live close to you and form bonds with these people online, not even knowing that it's quite likely they are in your same zip code. And then to just help think about how people feel who are alone, right? And why, or what the game can do to get people to find other people who are like-minded. This is the single activity in life that will lead to amazing things no matter what you're doing, no matter who you are. If you connect with people on a very deep level and you want to be similar to people you are around and living with, and they support you and encourage you, this produces a profound effect on every other part of your life. It is incredibly beneficial to be in this kind of environment. And sadly, most people don't have access to this kind of environment, right? So I need to explain a little bit more about my past and an experience that I had with video games to allow you guys to understand why it is that I think that it's critical that this is an MMO, not another kind of video game, okay? So when my father died, I was pretty little. I was 12, right? Or 11. And I was just drowning myself in books and video games. At first, it was books. That was I would read like 3 or 4 books a week. I didn't really talk to people. Like I would hang out with friends, and I had books in my bag for when my friends would take my books. So I would have more books to read when they did that. I was obsessed with it, right? And that happened with video games once I started playing them, right? Now, with video games in particular, I was playing a game called Runescape, and that was my first MMO experience. And this is the game that I was actively playing when my father died. I specifically remember the day he died, what I did in the video game. So I hadn't started playing World of Warcraft yet. But World of Warcraft was the experience that really opened my mind to the crazy power over humanity that these MMOs can have. I'm going to sidetrack real quick just to familiarize some of you with this. World of Warcraft player base at its peak. Okay, so there was a point in time where World of Warcraft had 12 million subscribers. Okay? But we don't want to look at that. Let's look at a more accurate metric. Let's look at how many people have been logged into the game at a single time. Let's look at how far that could be. Okay, so World of Warcraft maximum logged in. How many active players, maybe? This is going to be a little bit of a trickier metric to find. Active players at its peak. Okay, so we're going to go with this fact that there's over 10 million at its peak, right? Just to give you guys a sense of, if you imagine the players of World of Warcraft as a country, how big is that country? Let's go to countries by population. We're talking about 10 million people, right? So let's do a list. Hopefully we can get like a list of like 100 or something. And let's look at the population. All right, so the first three biggest have over 1 billion, right? India, United States, China. Okay, we got to go down a lot. But here we go. Now we are at 10 million, all right? Okay, so if World of Warcraft was a country, by population, it would be the 90th largest, roughly, 90th largest country in the world. Bigger than Portugal, Sweden, the United Arab Emirates, Honduras, Switzerland, Israel, Hong Kong, Laos, El Salvador, Singapore. Bigger than more countries than not. Just think about that for a second. Think about all of these people. Enough people played this game to be bigger than the population of more countries in the world than it was smaller than. If you really grasp that, you think about that. Now I'm going to share something else with you. And that's average play duration. So in order to understand this better, we need to understand a little bit about video game genres. All right. So let's see if we can quickly find something. Video game genres. I'm talking about a MMORPG. Okay. This is a massively multiplayer online role-playing game. The thing that makes this different is that you can play online and there's like, you can play with hundreds of other people, this kind of thing, right? Whereas a lot of other games, you can play with 1 to 4 people. These would be usually referred to as multiplayer games, right? And an MMO is a multiplayer game, but it's a specific kind of multiplayer game. And there's a lot of other genres to video games, and they can kind of meld together a little bit, right? But the most important thing I want you to understand here, and the reason I'm bringing this up, is because MMORPGs in particular, people spend a ludicrous amount of time playing these games. People can play a typical AAA video game. Like on average, a person can spend between 20 hours on a game that they purchase and actually play, and like 150. There being people who spend, you know, 400, 500, 1,000 even. But that's not as common, right? Whereas with an MMORPG, you'll find that there are thousands and thousands of people who have played these games for days and days of logged time. Way, way, way more than any other genre, okay? So people invest a lot more time into MMORPGs, exponentially more time into MMORPGs. And so I can give you an example of what my experience was like as a child. There was a character that I played in World of Warcraft. And in World of Warcraft, you can type /played, like you can just go /played like this and click enter. And then it tells you how long you've played logged into the game. And at this point, I was like a 15-year-old kid. This was 4 years after my father had died. And not all of it was playing World of Warcraft. Like I said, I played RuneScape when he died, but I then fell in love with WoW and had like an amazing experience with it, like a year or so after my father died, okay? And I'll get back more into that experience and why it was so relevant to me and how it's came to shape the way that I understand whether I enjoy a video game or I don't. But when I typed /played in this, I had played the game for 3 months of my life. And that doesn't mean I was necessarily active. It means that I had logged the game client in and I was there. I wasn't necessarily playing. So even if it's half that, okay? 3 months, 3 times 30 is 90 days. Now, there are 24 hours in every day, right? So, I'm doing something wrong here. No, 3 months. This is just the 24. I had played this game for 2,160 hours of my life. That is insane. That is such a huge portion of time. And think of this from a development perspective. You have 2,000 hours to influence a person, to create a dramatic emotional change in their life. If that's your intention, if you want to connect people, which is what I want to do, you can, other games, this number is usually like 20 or 40 hours, right? And I'm not saying every person plays an MMO for 2,000 hours. But the potential to get really into an MMO is there, and it's much more present than in the other genres. And this is important for you guys to understand because it plays into why exactly what I'm trying to do and why an MMO is necessary to accomplish this, okay? So now I need to go back and explain a little bit about my experience that I had. So when I got really into WoW, I remember just being completely mesmerized by it. Despite the fact that my father had recently died and I was in grief and that I didn't have that many friends and that I felt really lonely and that I was scared and that my mom was overwhelmed and I didn't know what was going to happen in my life because I felt that things had changed a lot and I didn't know what to think. It was intense, right? Despite all of this, I was able to just fall in love with this video game. And there were some variables here that you guys should be aware of. So I found WoW because a group of people that I knew in school were playing it. And some of my close friends got into it. And then so a couple of us started playing it a lot. And there were even dramas in our friends groups at the school about like if somebody was leveling too quickly or something, that other people would get jealous, and it was political, right? And to the point where at lunches we would talk about WoW. It dominated our lives, right? And it created an incredibly profound emotional experience in most of us. And this is something that, as a game creator, it is critical to understand, because Nintendo as a company, I think one of the things that makes them so successful is understanding this moment in time. The moment where, for the first time in a child's life, or a human's life, an adult's life, they connect with a video game in a way that furthers connection with other humans in their personal lives. This is the necessary feature to make video gaming productive and healthy, because it is completely possible to video game addictively in a way that alienates you from the people close to you. So you have to be very careful with how you use it and how you incentivize your players to play the game. And I've gone back into World of Warcraft multiple times in my life, like 5 or 6 times, to try and get that experience back, and I never have. And I noticed that there had been a fundamental change in the way that I played the game. When I was a kid and I played WoW, I didn't care about leveling. Like, it was kind of cool, but I could go off and just screw around with people. Like, I liked going to the beginning places and being like, we're gonna take you to a dragon, it's gonna be awesome, and then you would take them and they'd die, but it didn't matter, and then they got to see the world. And like, I loved interacting with people and just doing stuff like that, even though I wasn't necessarily incentivized to buy the video game. And as a child, I was often quite trolly. Like, I would just screw with people. I would find other new people and convince them that if they went somewhere, they would like get something great, and then just to see them get killed by a dragon and like laugh hysterically. It was amazing. But you know, that's another thing, right? But my point here is that I was so willing to just play the game and have fun. As I got older, when I would play, I was obsessed with progress. I was obsessed with trying to level as fast as possible. And essentially what had happened is I had kept trying to play the game to feel what I used to feel about it, but I didn't feel that. And I blamed the game, but the reality was I was playing it wrong. I had changed what I cared about in my life. I had changed my thought patterns, and I was in too much of a rush to actually find joy in the same way that I used to. Also, every time that I revisited the game, I lacked a group of people in my own life who were also playing the game. Also, I was unable to meet these people, or I was unable to meet groups of people in the video game, in World of Warcraft. Whereas when I was a child and I was just relentlessly myself, like I was that annoying person in a guild that people like, some people are amused by and really like, and other people hate. Like, I played a role in the social dynamic of that environment, and I knew the individuals and knew a bit about their lives and where they were. I got part of a guild that I got quite close to and felt an emotional attachment to. Whereas whenever I revisited World of Warcraft, that never happened. I never got that experience again. And so this has fed into this concept of all hardship in life coming from lacking this environment where you have a tribe or a family that you feel a very close, productive, healthy, mutual bond with. You want to be part of this group. You want to impress the people in this group. You want to be at your best whenever possible. These kind of things are indications of a healthy environment. So now we can get into some concepts of how could we create a game that fosters people building communities in a way where the community transcends the video game itself. And this is the tricky part, because we don't want to create communities that rely upon the video game to exist. We want to create communities of people, and later, 10, 20 years from now, they can be like, ah, yeah, we met playing that game. That's the goal here. Because we can't keep people on the platform forever, and that's not something that I think is in my best interest as an individual. What I want is to be able to provide a huge number of people with a profound emotional experience that translates into their actual lives, right? I believe that I'm in a good position as an individual who's experienced death at a young age and also been heavily influenced by video games. I think that I'm in a very good position to create something that works this way, right? So there's a couple tricks that you can do from the very beginning with these concepts. So one of them is the fact that, okay, the people who play this game will be paying players. Like typically with MMOs, you pay a monthly fee to pay the game, right? So they are also the games that people spend the most time in, and also the games that you end up paying a lot more for. You pay more than $60 for an MMO if you play it for more than 6 months. And a lot of people who stick with it play it for years, you know? So that means that as the company, you have access to the locations of the individuals. And now we need to take a step back and explain how MMOs typically work. Because you guys need to understand that there are servers that you join to play these games. Like we used World of Warcraft as an example earlier, right? With 10 million players. Those players aren't all on one server. You can't just log into World of Warcraft and play with all of those 10 million people, right? The way it works is that it's split up into thousands of different servers, and you pick a server when you create a character. And usually you can create multiple characters on a single server. So let's say I create a character on the paper server, and you create a character on the rock server. We can be at the same place in the game, but actually unable to see each other because we are on different versions of the world, different servers. And this has to be done because you can't just have everybody in the same place. It's too crowded. The game, you have to be transmitting so much data that isn't effective. That doesn't work. You can have hundreds or thousands of people in the same place. That's fine. But you can't have millions, right? So it's necessary. But this presents an interesting problem or opportunity, right? Because as we've talked about earlier, community is quite important here. And in my experience, I enjoyed the game so much more when it was introduced to me by a community of people in my life that I interacted with in some way. So this means that you have to play on the same server if you want to play together. And that's something that you should understand because it relates to the next concept that I'm about to explain. Whenever you make a new character, say that you're playing for the first time, you're playing an MMO, if you have a friend, then they're going to tell you the server they're playing on and you can join them. Say that it's a European server, you can probably join them. If it's a US server, usually it's really easy. Typically, you pick a server and then you maybe can't use other servers or maybe you can, it depends. But that's going to be pretty typical. Or you create a character for the first time and you're just checking a game out and you start playing it. You just pick a random server. You can usually pick your server. The game may try and pick for you, but it'll choose the server based on the population and proximity for latency reasons, right? It's going to pick the server that you are closest to, that you have the best connection for, okay? So one of the core fundamentals that I think is necessary in this dream MMO that I'm talking about is that the servers are smaller. They don't have hundreds of thousands of people in them, and they are specific to the zip codes in your billing address. Because we need to make it a little bit inconvenient for people to kind of spoof it. They'll always be able to spoof it, and that's fine. If they want to put in a lot of effort and spoof it, that's great. But we need to just make it a little bit inconvenient. And the goal here, the reason that I want to encourage the chance that players live close to each other, that needs to be heavily, heavily, heavily encouraged. I want it to be likely in this game that you are interacting with somebody, you have some kind of connection with someone, you played with them, you liked them, or you talked about something and you enjoyed it, or whatever, right? You've made a friend online. I want to make it very likely that that person lives within 30 to 40 minutes of you. Just so that the chance of you interacting in person is more likely. I think that this is a critical early force or thought to be able to increase the chance later on that more communities are formed that last past the video game, right? So this is something that will have to be dealt with a little bit, because there are going to be times where you want to play with somebody else but you don't live near them, so the server it gives you is different. So I have to figure out whether I'm just going to be harsh and just be like, you have to play around people you live with, or maybe that's a chance for monetization. I'm not really sure what would happen there. But another thing here that I haven't written down to or gotten to yet is why I'm not currently working on the game. Because I used to be, and I came to an understanding. I was observing video games and also other video game creators and their stories, right? Because I want to create this. And in the past, I thought that meant, okay, I have to be making it now, right? However, I noticed a recurring problem in most games and in most companies. And this was a twofold problem. One, limitation of finance. And two, limitation of time. Most video games are rushed because of deadlines and other interests. This has produced very, very many bad games that could have been great if they were more polished and more time was taken. However, development was rushed. This is incredibly common, especially because if you research into video game history, in the early video game history, like we're talking about like Atari, NES times, it got hugely popular and crashed, right? And it's interesting to think of it and study this event, because essentially what happened is video games were becoming popular and people wanted to market and invest in them and make money off of them because of this fad, this trend that was happening. And this happened so abusively and so extensively that the quality level of video games dropped so much that interest in the industry crashed for a period of time before it inevitably came back. So, in these games, we have an opportunity to influence people in a way that I don't believe exists in any other medium. A video game is essentially an exponential combination of photos and music and art and videos and stories and writing and short stories and anything that could be interpreted through text or images or audio, all in one profound experience. This presents a huge opportunity to influence people in a meaningful, lasting way. And knowing that most video games are rushed, knowing that most video games need finances, I took a step back and started to think about my life and how if I play my cards right, I can put myself in a situation where I have ample free time and ample extra money. If I delay my entry into video game development by pursuing interests that lead to passive income, then the chance of me successfully creating something to this scale is much, much, much more likely. All right? And that's all I'm going to talk about now. I just wanted to really share this with you guys and also help myself better articulate why this is so important to me and why I say things like, this is my ultimate ambition, and that kind of thing. This is the thing that if I were to be able to do before I die, I will feel very happy that I'm able to create something like this. That would mean a lot to me, because once something like this exists, even if I perish, there's an effect that rolls, that continues, of people working together, a lasting long-term impression on people. And this is something that I really, really want to accomplish. All right, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Ciao!